All right. Welcome everyone to this live event on auto layout. Let me just get the webcam so you can see my face. There we go. Welcome to this live event. Today we're going to be talking about auto layout using a library called MisterFusion in Swift. And I have a little bit of stuff prepared for you guys. I'm really excited. I hope that you'll like it. And during this live event, I want you to make sure to write down questions, take notes, and send them in at the end because we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, if I didn't answer anything, if I failed to answer anything, you get the opportunity to ask me questions right there. So let's dive right in. Just a second, I'm going to start the presentation. And now you should be able to see my screen. This is, we're going to be talking a little bit about what auto layout actually is before diving into the library called MisterFusion. And I want to do that because I want to, there's a little bit of basic knowledge that you need to know about before you can work with this library. That's why I have a little bit of stuff prepared. I pulled this from the auto layout module that I produced. You can find this at theswiftlibrary.com. And this is just a small section I pulled out of there. So I can get you up to speed with everything. So let's first take a look at all the problems that we have when we are developing apps. The first thing that we have is we have a lot of different devices. Apple has a huge device palette, and there's iPhones, iPads, MacBooks, iMacs, Mac Minis, which you can attach almost any display to, which you can on the iMac as well and on the MacBook as well. And those are difficult to deal with because they all have different screen sizes, different screen resolutions, and if we have our apps on there, we need to make sure that the layout always looks nice on all of the different screen sizes. And that's not the only problem. Think about it that way. For example, if we have our iPhone and we launch our app, we have one layout. Now, if we rotate the whole device, we need to adjust the layout accordingly. And then also on newer devices and on newer iPads and the biggest iPhones, we even have a sidebar view where we would need to adjust the layout again. So there's a lot of cases where you would want your app to adapt automatically. You don't want to hard code programmatically every single version that could appear. Instead, we want to change this dynamically based on what the user is doing with the app. And this is basically what auto layout does for you. I mean, you could implement all of this by hand, but it is really annoying, and probably a lot of things will go wrong. Now, Apple has produced this auto layout system which implements basically everything that we need in order to get our layout right. So let's look at an outline of what we're going to be talking about today. First, I have the basics of auto layout compiled for you, which basically we're going to focus on constraints, then places to attach constraints to, different sets of constraints. So basically we're learning what constraints are, where we can use them, and how we can match multiple constraints together to create a working set of constraints. And this is basically everything you need to know to get started with auto layout. Of course, you can go really deep into the theory, and I recommend this if you're doing this professionally, for example. But for now, this is everything you need to know. Then we're going to take a look at how to install the MisterFusion library, which we're going to be doing using Cocoa Pods. And this is just a small step. And it's for the people that haven't really dealt with libraries yet. And this is the biggest tile, is the practical part, is where we're going to be looking at how to build a login form, where I have prepared a layout inside of the interface builder, and we want to replicate this basically. I have already added all the elements inside of the code, but we want to take a look at that. and then how we want to set up the layout using the library. So basically, the deep dive is the last point, and this is really going to take a while. So let's start by looking at the anatomy of a constraint. First off, we have to ask ourselves, what are constraints? Now, constraints, you probably read that a lot all over Xcode. We use them, we should be using them all the time, but it's kind of this nebulous cloud of a word. You don't really know what it means. If we get really practical, and if we get down to it, it's just a math equation. And this math equation describes the behavior of two different views. So I already said something there. We need two different views for a constraint most of the time. Now, there are exceptions, but let's just generalize this for now. And here's what a constraint could look like. Now, this constraint right here is the constraint that applies a little bit of spacing between the blue and the red view that we have right here. Now, what does this equation need? It needs, first off, two views. I already mentioned that. In our case, this is the red view and the blue view. What we have next is the attributes, which would be the right edge of the blue view and the left edge of the red view. Then we have a relationship. And lastly, we have a multiplier as well as a constant. Now I'm going to quickly explain what this constraint does. What this does is it takes the right edge of the blue view and the left edge of the red view. Those are basically the two views and the two attributes, and it sets the relationship between them. Now in this case, this is an equal sign. You could also use a greater or equal or less than or equal relationship, but we'll just focus on that for now. What this does is align the left edge of the red view and the right edge of the blue view and basically put them on the same spot. Now our multiplier, if it would be set to 0, basically it would make our whole constraint useless. So the multiplier is usually a 1. And we have a +8 on a constant right at the end. And what this does is it introduces a little bit of the gap between the blue and the red view, because it takes the red edge, the left edge of the red view, and pushes it by 8 to the right. And that's how we get this little gap in between. Now that's how a constraint works. You can see this inside of Xcode, not really most of the time, only if you're dealing with constraints in code. If you're dealing with constraints inside of the interface builder, you most likely will not notice that because Xcode does a lot of the work itself automatically. Now let's talk a little bit about the types of constraints that there are. We basically have a couple of standard constraints, which would be the width, the height, the top, bottom, left, and right constraints. And we have taken a look at the right and the left constraint, right and left edge constraints in the last example, right? And the top and the bottom basically do exactly the same. So with the left and the right, you can align stuff in the X direction. And with the top and the bottom, you can align stuff on the Y direction of your canvas. Then we also have the width and the height, which is pretty self-explaining. It sets the width and the height. No surprise there. But there is something special right here. We also have a leading and a trailing constraint. Now you might ask yourself, what the hell is that? We just had the left and the right constraint. Isn't that exactly the same? Yes, kind of. Right now it is, because we're assuming that the view that we're dealing with, for example, is a label or a text field with a left to right language, just like English or German or whatever type of language, except with a few exceptions, of course. And those are the languages where we write from left to right. In this case, the leading edge is the left edge and the trailing edge is the right edge. Now, what if we go into the Arabic type languages where people write from right to left? That's pretty interesting because then both of those flip around. The leading edge suddenly is the right edge, and the trailing edge suddenly is the left edge. And this is basically only interesting if you're dealing with text inside of labels or stuff like that. And there are other types of constraints. For example, this is really important. I use those all the time, and that's the center X and the center Y constraint. And what they basically just take the center of your view, which basically the name says already. This is really easy. And then we have the whole thing with margin. Now, as you can see, the dotted line that we have in the middle right here is a little bit smaller than the view that we have applied our constraints to. And this is basically the margin. You can apply margin to any view, and the constraints can also be set to the margins. And basically you have exactly the same constraints as we had before. We have the right margin, left margin, bottom margin, top margin, and leading and trailing, and also center Y and center X with margin. Basically, they do exactly the same except with margin. So you don't take the alignment rectangle of the view, but the alignment rectangle of the view plus margins. And lastly, what you need to know about auto layout is what a proper set of constraints is. And that basically is a set of constraints that sets a minimum requirement of attributes on a view. This is a little bit tricky because there are optional constraints and you can play around with priorities. But right now, let's just focus on this. Let's say we have a view. We would need to set the width, the height, the X and the Y position. And then basically all your errors are gone from Xcode. For example, we have all tried this, I'm sure. We've gone into Xcode, we've placed a view on our canvas, we've applied constraints to it, and suddenly there was an error. And the error most likely was because one of those four things wasn't set. Either the width, the height, the X, or the Y position wasn't set. Or you did set constraints that set them multiple times, for example, conflicting constraints. That is also something. So that's all that I want to dive into for now. Basically, that's all you need to know when getting started with auto layout. Now, if this wasn't enough for you, I have a module about auto layout where I go into really a lot of more details in the theory and also in the practical side of auto layout that you can find on the swiftlibrary.com. I'm going to link that up at the end. I'm going to put that in the chat. And this will definitely, but you know, what we covered right now would definitely get you started with this. So now, let me just close this and let's take a look at what we're going to be covering. First of all, I want you to download those two projects that I have set up on the live page right here. And basically what this will give you is two folders. First, an auto layout MisterFusion finished and a plain project. And those project files are basically what we're going to be working with today. I want you to download those now and open up Xcode and then we can get started. The first thing that we want to do is install the library. And we're going to do that by, by the way, I'm assuming that you already have Cocoa Pods installed on your computer. If you don't worry, there are plenty of tutorials out there that will tell you how to install Cocoa Pods on your MacBook or basically any device you're working with. And I'm assuming you have this installed, but I'm going to show you how to install the library now. And that's basically we want to open a terminal and we want to have the folder open right here. And now what we need to do is we need to switch our working folder from the terminal to this folder right here where our Xcode project file is. And we're going to do that by typing cd. And now here's a little trick. We now need to type in the path that we want to move to. I'm going to do that by right-clicking on the project file, hitting information, and then right-clicking on the location right here and hit copy. And then we're going to paste that in. It's just a little trick so you can get to your destination quicker. If you know how to use the cd command, you can also move there manually, obviously. But this is just if you're not familiar with the terminal, this is the way to go. Now what we want to do is we want to type in pod init. What this does, it creates a pod file in here. This pod file is the file that tells Cocoa Pods which libraries to include to this project. What we're going to type in here, and I already have this set up right here, is pod and then MisterFusion and then the version, just like I have right here. I want you to copy this into the pod file, then save the pod file. We can close this now. And now we hit pod install. And what this does is it creates a bunch of folders and files for us because it now installs the library for us. We can close the terminal for now. What we got here now is the new folder that we need to work with. As you can see, we now have an Xcode project and an Xcode workspace, which is weird, but the workspace is what we're going to be working with. So you now need to open up this Xcode workspace. It's going to take a while because my laptop is busy streaming, obviously. And now we can go into here. And now I want to show you what I've already set up. What I have right now is a main storyboard. Sorry, my laptop is freaking out. And on the storyboard files, I have set up the layout the way we want to create it. So this is basically a working layout. Also, I have already applied the constraints to everything. And then we have a blank canvas right now where we have the entry point. So if we now select the iPhone SE or select whatever iPhone you want, SE starts up usually pretty fast, so that's why I'm taking this one. So let's just let the laptop do its work. And what this is going to do is it going to put a little bit of stuff in here, basically the same objects as we have here, but not layouted completely. And that's okay, because we will fix that. Let's see, where's the simulator? Right here. Let's move this over. Oh no. Let's rearrange this. Okay, it's going to take a while. But you will notice that the layout is off. And that's what we want to fix. Right now, I just put everything on there so that you can see what's going on and what objects that you have. Oh no, actually. I think I commented. Oh no. Ah, yeah, there we go. And now we want to recreate this layout right here. And we're going to do that with the library. So first thing that we want to do is we want to import MisterFusion, which imports the MisterFusion library that we just installed. And let's get rid of all the views that we already have in here. And we're going to do that by hitting Command and /. It comments everything out. And now if we would run everything, the view would be empty. And I'm doing this because MisterFusion actually has the option of adding subviews to a parent view while applying constraints to it. And this is really important to note at this point because that's why I've removed all of those add subviews. Sorry. So let's start. First off, we're going to say self.view.mf, which allows us to access the MisterFusion library. That's why we type mf here. Now I'm going to say add subview. I'm going to choose the one with add constraints, plural, because there's also a singular right here. We don't want to use that. We want to use the plural one. And I'm just going to quickly explain what I'm about to do. What I want is I want to set the logo to be in the middle of the whole view. And then I'm going to push it off to the side, to the top, and then align all the other elements based on the logo. So that way, if I adjust the logo, everything else aligns with it. And that's basically what I want to do. That's the idea. And I'm going to do this by starting with the logo view. So we're going to type in logo view, which adds the subview logo view. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create the constraints inside of here. Let's just go ahead and say logo view dot width and type this operator, which in the MisterFusion library is the equals operator, because you obviously can't use the regular equals because it's used for something else. And then we can set this to maybe 80. The next thing we want to do is we want to type in logo view dot height. And what I want to do is I want to have this, to always have this have exactly the same aspect ratio. And since it's a square image, we can use the width in here. So we can say logo view dot width. And this basically makes it, if I change the width now, the height also changes with it. And then we want to take logo view dot center x equals self dot view dot center x. And then exactly the same thing with the y direction. So what have I done here? Let me just recap this real quick. We have set the width, we have set the height to the width, and we also set the center x and the center y. So now let's build it. No, let me just move this bracket up. And now let's build this and see if there are any errors. Did I do anything wrong? I hope not. Looks good. So now the view, the logo should be exactly in the center of our canvas. Let's see if it works. Boom, it works. Very nice. This doesn't exactly match what I was about to do because we want to push the logo off to the top. So let's think. This is the X direction, this is the Y direction, and it's starting in this corner and going downwards, which means we would need to apply a constant of minus to push it to the top. And we need to apply the minus in the Y direction. And this is basically what we're going to do. We're going to say minus in here, and then let's, for example, pick 135. Now if we run this again, the logo view should be pushed to the top. Let's see if it worked. I'm not going to always jump back and forth between the simulator and code. I'm just going to do it right here. And it works. Nice. A logo view aligns nicely. We might need to change that value later, but for now, this is totally fine. And then we're going to start by, we're going to continue by adding the app title. So let's do self.view.mf.add subview. Again, and constraints. And now we select the app title. When it comes to the constraints, it now gets a little bit more interesting because this constraint, the first constraint, which is the top border, basically will be based on the logo view. So let's start with that. Let's look in here. We have the logo view, so we need to take the bottom edge of the logo view and the top edge of the app title. And we want to bind this together with a constant of, let's say, I don't know, 10 maybe. And that's what we're going to do. So app title dot top equals logo view dot bottom plus, and this is the interesting part, we need to apply maybe a constant of 10 to that. Push that to the next, hit comma, and then we can enter the next constraint. Basically, and this is another interesting thing, we want to take the left edge of this and bind it to the outside of the canvas, and on the right as well, so that the label always shows the whole text, and it only hides some stuff if the display isn't big enough. And we want to do that. We would need to go ahead and say app title dot left and set it to self dot view dot left, and then app title dot right and set it to self dot view dot right. And now the label should be exactly the same width as our super view, as our canvas basically. And the height is something we do not need to set right now, because a label always has a set height. But because I'm using a bigger font, we might need to change this. We're going to have to take a look at that. So let's just say, oops, dot height, and for example, let's just set it to maybe, I don't know, 30. Maybe a bit much. Let's remove that and see what it looks like first. And basically what this should do is put the app title directly below our logo view. See if it works? Yes, it works. And now, for example, if we change this to plus 135, the text would move with the logo. So I now changed the position of the logo only, and our app title should follow immediately, which it does. So let's change this back. We don't want to have this, but everything works fine. And the height of the label also works fine. So the next thing that we want to do is take a peek in here, and we want to add the username text field and the password text field, as well as the login button. I'm going to do that in a single run. So let's say self.view.mf, which stands for MisterFusion again. Add subviews using constraints. Type in username text field, which, by the way, if you don't know where I get this from, those are all the variables up here. I already declared those. And we're going to start by saying username text field dot top and setting it to the app title dot bottom, which is again chaining everything together. Bottom. And let's say, for example, maybe I want a gap of 30 in there. Then we want to go ahead and set the username dot text field dot width. We want to set it to a constant width. So what we want to have is we want to have all of those views exactly the same width. Now we could enter in the same value in every instance of this, or we could declare a variable that defines this, and we can use the variable in there. And that way, if we want to change the width of the layout, we only have to change one variable. And I'm doing this because this is a really interesting thing that you need to remember. Let's say general width, and this is the important part. It has to be of type CG float. All right, this is what we need. Well, for example, let's say 250. And now we should be able to set this to general width. The height we don't need to set. And something that we want to do right here, because we have not used the left and the right constraints of those of this username text field, we want to have the center of the view align with the center of the subview. I'm going to do that by typing username text field dot center x, just like we did on the logo right here, and align it with the self.view.center in x direction. Am I right? Is it the x direction? Yes, it is. And what this does is let me just show this. It takes the center of the username text field that we have right here, and it aligns it with the center of the super view, which in this case is our canvas. That's basically all that happens at this point. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing, so I'm just going to copy it, which, by the way, is a scary thing because you need to change a lot. But since this is exactly the same, I want to show you how to copy this. First off, we want to add the password text field and take it and basically replace username text field with password text field everywhere. And then we want to bind this to the username text field.bottom. So again, let me just illustrate this. Take the bottom edge of the username and the top edge of the password. And we're going to change the constant to 10 so they don't, so that they have a little bit of spacing only. And then the last thing that we want to do is we want to add the login button. Do that by typing login button. And as you can see, since they're all of, I don't know how to say this, they all base on the UI view. And that is why we can type in all different types of elements in here. For example, we used an image view, a label, a UI text field, and a UI button, and it all works. And that is the really nice thing about the auto layout framework, is that it can work with all different types of views, and you don't need to like think about specific stuff right there. Last thing we want to do is replace everything. So adjust it. And what we do is take the top edge of the login button and the bottom of the password text field plus 10. Then we set it to the general width, and we also center it in X direction. Now let's run this, and I'm 100% positive that I did make some mistakes, but oh no, actually it works. Because usually if you hit play, it doesn't work. Yay, it works. That's unusual. So the first thing I'm noticing right now is the gap in here isn't really, like, I don't like this. This is not enough space for me. So I'm going to increase this maybe to, let's say 40. And then we're going to test this by rotating so that we can see that auto layout actually is doing something and we didn't just do something nasty. So let's rotate. And boom, as you can see, the layout adapts beautifully. One thing I notice is that the logo gets pushed off just a little bit. So we're going to bring this in maybe, let's say 115. That should work. Take a look at this again. And this should work. Looking good. Yes, perfect. So that's basically how I built this auto layout. Layout? Is this a thing? Maybe. This exact thing in code using the library. So just as a quick recap, we imported the library, and then we basically we had a concept of what our layout should look like, and then we thought of a way to realize this. Now what we could also have done is we could have started with a login button and then based everything off of the login button, or maybe of the username field, whatever. The only important thing is that you keep things straight in your head. So if you're trying to do an auto layout, spend a little bit of time thinking about how you want to do this, because this really can make or break your app. Because right now this is super easy to maintain, but for example, if we would change the size of the logo, everything else would shift. In my case, that's not a problem, but for example, if you're building something else, another layout, this could totally ruin everything. So you always want to make sure that they are dependent on each other, but not too strong. All right. That about wraps this up. That's all I have for now. Now I want to see if you guys have any questions. Let's see. Oh, looks like no questions. Well then, I would say that about wraps this up. I hope you found this valuable. This was a short explanation of what auto layout does and how you can do it using the MisterFusion library. If this wasn't enough for you, if you're thirsty and you want to learn more about auto layout, for example, you want to dive a little bit deeper into the theory, or you want to see a couple of other examples, or you want to see how you can do it without a library, which is also, I recommend this as well. You can go over to theswiftlibrary.com and find the auto layout module. And I'll post this in the chat. Oops, sorry. And this is the link. You can just go there. The module is at an introductory price right now because not all the videos are out yet, but it's almost finished. So there's only a couple of things missing. And you can get it for $29 right now. But that price is going away in 2 days. So on May 12th, the price is going away. The other thing is I have an email course on auto layout that dives a little bit deeper into that, which is free. You can sign up with your email address, and you can find that under free materials and email courses over at theswiftlibrary.com. So if you're unsure whether this will be valuable to you, or if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can just go in there, type your email address in, sign up, and I hope you find this valuable. You'll get 5 emails, and this dives a little bit deeper than we could in this auto layout webinar. And the last thing is, if you go to YouTube and search for iCode, which basically types like this, there's a channel of a guy that does some Swift tutorials, and I'm doing a giveaway together with him, and he's announcing it tomorrow. There will be the giveaway, and we're giving away 2 of the auto layout modules for free, so you can sign up there, and maybe if you're lucky, you will get one of the auto layout modules for free. So that's everything I have for now, and I would say thanks for tuning in, and I hope you found this valuable. Spread the word, and I hope to see you the next time. Oh no, I totally forgot. Oh no, I already did the Q&A. No questions. Really? No one has questions? I'm still available. I just noticed. No? Okay. Well then, I'll see you the next time. Bye.